Welcome, boys and girls, to another in our investigative science series. Today, we're investigating the effects of different masses on the extension of a spring. So, for our activity today, we have a balance that we'll be using to measure the masses of the different objects, a set of weights, which will provide us with different masses, a spring balance, a ruler, and of course, our clamp and stand. Before we get into the activity, we need to establish something about forces. What are forces? Can you see forces? Or can we see the effects of forces? And so we know that forces can be classified as push, pull, or a twist. And so we're going to demonstrate that by looking at this magic spring. So this magic spring, if I pull, I'm exerting a force on it. And if I push, I'm also exerting a force on it. What about our rubber band or elastic band? Have you ever tried pulling a rubber band? When you pull the rubber band, what happens? We see that pulling the rubber band helps to stretch it, all right? And so we are able to see the effects of forces. And so today we're looking at the effect of a particular force. What we have here is a spring balance, and what we're going to do is that we're going to look for objects that will give us different masses. And if you do not have a set of weights, you could simply collect your object and use the balance to get the mass of the object. We would record the mass of these objects. So for my weight set, I have 50 gram set, 50 gram. I have a 100 gram weight, and I have a 200 gram weight. And so we're going to look and see what happens to the spring when I place these different objects on the spring balance. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to measure the length of our spring. So we use a ruler, starting from 0 on the ruler, and we're going to measure the length of the spring, which is this particular section here. Now, we're basically going to be estimating, all right? So when I place my ruler, starting with the 0 point, at the bottom of the spring, right up to where it ends, we have a measurement of about 4 centimeters. And so we would record this in our table of results. So the initial length of our spring is 4 centimeters. Now, what will we do next? We will then attach or place one of our weight set, right, onto our spring and see how far it extends. But before we actually do that, we want to make a prediction. What do you think? If I use a 50 gram, 100 gram, or a 200 gram weight, what do you think will happen to the spring? That is our prediction. So we are predicting that the heavier object or the heavier mass will cause the spring to extend further. Do you have another prediction? Okay, so let us get started. So we'll first of all draw up our table that has the mass of different objects and the distance that the spring would move. So let us start with 50 grams. Attach our weight, 50 grams. And what do we do next? We will take our ruler and we will measure the distance of this, the length, sorry, of this spring. So based on this, and again we're estimating, this seems to be about 4.5 centimeters. And so we will record that in our table. Very good. What do you think will happen if I attach 100 gram weight to this particular spring? Would it go further than 4.5 centimeters? All right, let's see. So we're adding 100 grams. What do you notice? Compare the extension of this spring to this spring here, which does not have a weight on it. All right, so again, we're going to measure the distance or the extension of the spring. Now this extension looks to be about 6.5 centimeters. And so we will take our different weights and we'll have different combinations. So I could probably add 150 grams. I don't have a 150 gram weight right there. So how do I get 150 grams? I can simply add a 100 gram weight and a 50 gram weight, and I would get 150 grams. And again, we would go ahead and measure how far the spring has stretched. And here, I'm seeing something that looks like about 8 centimeters. And finally, we're going to look at the 200 gram mass. All right. Again, compare the extension that is on this spring to what it looked like originally. What are you noticing? Okay, so we measure the distance, and this distance looks to be about 9 centimeters. And of course, we could continue, put on a 250 gram weight or a 300 gram weight and see how the spring stretches. Good. Now, remember our prediction? What was our prediction again? We predicted that the objects that have heavier masses, or the objects that are heavier, or the masses that are greater, would cause the spring to stretch further. Did our results support our prediction? Let's see. When the mass of the object was 50 grams, our spring, the distance was at 4.5 centimeters. But when we use a 200 gram mass, the distance was now at 9 centimeters. So it seems, therefore, that our prediction was correct. So which mass caused the shortest extension of the spring? Based on our results, so it's good to write down your results. The 50 gram mass caused the shortest extension of the spring. And which object caused the longest extension of the spring? Again, look at our table of results, and we'd see that the 200 gram mass gave us the longest extension. Of course, if you had done other masses like 250 grams or 300 grams, you would have other measurements. Now, we want to look at our results and see if we can come up with a relationship between the mass of the object and the extension of the spring. Or, in other words, is there a cause and an effect relationship happening with how far the spring stretches and the masses of the objects that we used? What is that relationship? And so from our results, we can basically say that as the mass of the objects increased, what did you notice? As the mass of the objects increased, the spring stretched further, or there was an increase in the extension of the spring. And that statement would describe our relationship. So, what can we conclude? Remember, our aim was to investigate how the different masses affected the extension of the spring. So, what is our conclusion? Our conclusion is therefore that the greater the mass, yes, the greater the mass of the object used, the greater the extension of the spring. And so heavier objects or heavier masses would cause a greater extension of the spring. That's all for today, boys and girls. Join us next time for more investigative science. Goodbye.